Hey, everybody. This is the Fall Line with Chaos and Company. And Angelo and I are here today. We're just going to chat a little bit. And it's not one of those where people love what's bugging Angelo, but it's more we just want to get some info out. And we thought we'd have a good chat together and talk about some standards, talk about some stuff with our new assessments, as people call them, which were formerly known as our exams, just to kind of demystify and hopefully help some folks start to get ready for their assessments, especially in the level 2 zone. We probably focus there a little bit today. If we did all 3, Angelo, it would take forever. But we can just keep going on some new ones to go through maybe level 3, go through level 1 a little bit. But I thought we'd just kind of start at the beginning and chat about some things. And so, Angelo, what do you been drinking over there? Is that water or coffee?
That is tea.
Tea. Yep. Yeah.
There.
I went with water this morning. No
Pete
bourbon.
Allison told me, I asked Pete because he's a Brit, what's the best tea?
Yeah.
And he said Tetley. So
Tetley?
It's a Tetley tea.
So does he go with honey?
I think he does it straight up. And if I'm not mistaken, he orders his Tetley from the UK. I don't believe it's our diminished quality American Tetley. I think he's on the full octane.
We'll have to get Bobby in that conversation, Mr. Shostak, because he's a big tea man. He doesn't do coffee, but he's like a Lipton guy, Lipton only. So
a few months ago, well, maybe 5 weeks ago, I was at Mammoth Mountain for Western examiner training, and I was staying with, we were in a condo with Linnea Anderson, who's their education guru, and her husband, Terry, who's an examiner, and Pete and I, we were all sharing a unit. And we came in after skiing, and Pete said, can I fix anybody a cup of tea? And I'm like, well, anytime a Brit is like, can I make you some tea? You answer yes. So he had this kit that he brought with him, and he mixed it up and he brought it over. And I was on my computer. We were getting ready for day 2 of the training. And next thing I know, I hear this bloop, 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 and I look over and he's dumping like all this bourbon in it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
There you go.
That's why you like tea so much.
Oh, I got to hang out with Pete Allison. We can have some bourbon in the tea. But it's kind of cool to bring up him and a story with him because, a lot of this where I want to go into this morning that you and I have talked is just a lot of it's the connection with Penn State and putting us on the map, I think, a little bit, in my opinion, of the certificate program through Penn State. And it leads into our learning connection and how the partnership is that a lot of folks, I believe, and you can jump in here, Angelo, after I kind of make this statement, because I know you probably have some good thoughts on this, that a lot of folks think the organization came out with new standards, and we came out with the unified assessment form for the new assessment, and everybody's going new. And yeah, they're updated and really very, how would I say it? They're definitely more transparent. There's a lot more in there to show exactly what you need to do. There's criteria of what we're looking at. We look specifically to the criteria versus my own biases of, I want them to be able to do this. It's really to the criteria that's listed. But when you go through all that, in my view, it's not all new. It's updated. It's really updated on our learning connection model, and it's updated in terms of those that worked on this really came up with the criteria that we needed to be looking at for good skiing and good teaching. And good skiing and good teaching weren't changed. I think it was kind of neat as you look back at the interskis, and our team went to the past few interskis. I think the last, at least probably 4 now, if we look back in terms of when they started thinking about the skiing fundamentals, then went into the teaching fundamentals, and then the people skills came out of that. It really, they went to a format of what is good teaching. And then the people skills came out of that. And then before that was, what is good skiing in the U.S.? What do we view as good skiing? It wasn't what's new. It was, how do we define these things? And I hope that people will start maybe taking that view, that it's not new. It's the organization absolutely defining what our good skiing, what our view is of that to the world, what our good teaching view is, and what our people skills view is. Am I off base, buddy?
No, I agree. It looks new. I tell you what it is. I think you said transparent. Excuse me. And I'm going to apologize because I'm still post-COVID. So every once in a while, I kind of choke on my own, on whatever breath. But I think you used the word transparent. I would say it's I would say it's extraordinarily complete.
Yeah.
And I would say it's definitely restructured. I think that's probably what looks new, is that it's definitely structured differently than it used to be. So yeah. people would have to get used to a new format. But the content is or should be familiar to anybody who's a student of what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's always been a discussion of, is there CERT training and is there regular training at the home resorts? And I've always been, at times I will put up CERT training, but it's more to get those folks that are really in tune and want to ski together as a group, get the study groups going. But the training's training. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm doing a CERT training separate, because it's different to get certified than to do good teaching, then the certification process doesn't mean much. And I've really tried to get away from that CERT training. It's like all the training we do at the home resort, and when I'm out there even training with PSIA, if I'm training good teaching, good skiing movements, and how to present that with communicating with people well, that is what we should be training. And that's, I hope that starts to hit home, that like the fundamentals, that's the number one thing that has hit home with me, that started a while ago. And we definitely hear it from all the team members, but I think I remember it first from really hearing it from Matt Boyd, was train to the fundamentals. Don't get so deep into all the little nits and gritty and pieces and parts right away. If you train to the fundamentals of good skiing, good teaching, and good people skills, all the other stuff on the assessment form, and when you go to the assessment, you'll be able to perform well.
I think another way to phrase that, but in my mind, it's really the same thing, is you train to the job. You know? And you remember back in the day, I remember this, I'm sure you do. Like maybe in the 90s, the mentality was, it wasn't uncommon to hear somebody say something like, I'm going to take a year off so I can train for my exam. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And that
Absolutely.
I think we accepted it as pretty normal at the time, but like it doesn't take you very long to realize that that's kind of backwards, because it really, like you said, to your point, the process of getting ready for a cert should be the same as doing the job. And I think what the team has done, what the organization has done over the last couple of years, has really made that point well, because it's like the guiding question to develop all these materials has been, what makes a great instructor? Yeah. So it's really about doing the job, So to Matt's point, training to the fundamentals, I agree with that. I just think another way to think about it, it's really saying the same thing, is to train to the job, do the job. Yeah. So there really is no difference between training in the sense of I'm going to get better at the job and I'm going to get ready to go try to get this new credential. It's really the same thing.
So, hey, let's dig in. I think if we start with just to make sure, because I think everybody knows what we're chatting about, but just to make sure the fundamentals. I mean, we have in our learning connection model, we have our tech triangle, we've got our teaching skill triangle, and we've got our people skills. And, people skills is kind of where the team really feels like they set themselves apart from the rest of the world, which I think is pretty cool. And we've been chatting about them for a long time. We've been working on them. And those, we have 4 fundamentals there. The ability to develop relationships based on trust. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big one. And then engage in meaningful two-way communication. And then identify, understand, and manage your emotions and actions. That's the instructor. Can you manage your own emotions, understand how they're affecting other people, and then recognize and influence the behaviors, motivations, and emotions of others? Mm-hmm. How do we interpret and understand, and how do we, when someone's kind of bored, how do we get them back in the fold? Or if someone doesn't understand something, gets frustrated, how do we deal with that emotion when it does, so it doesn't disrupt the rest of the group, but also helps that person. And I know you're big on these, Angelo, because you as an educator know, man, if you can't make the bond, you can't make a connection with your students, it's pretty hard to get them motivated to learn. So I do feel that this is really a cool triangle, that this is important. If you don't do this, the other stuff you can be phenomenal at, in terms of you can know all the tech, all the pieces, you can ski unbelievable, mm-hmm. and you can talk about it. But is it going to get through to somebody? I think, people need to look at these, how they present information, how they present themselves, and how that affects information delivery.
That's been missing from education for a long time.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Like coming up through the school system in the public school system in the 70s and like early to mid 70s and 80s is when I was in public school. Discipline could be harsh. I mean, I remember when kids used to get paddled. If you were bad, you got taken out into the hallway and hit with a wooden stick, man. That probably wouldn't fly these days.
No.
No, but I mean, yeah, you can have the hottest feet on the hill. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're trying to teach somebody something that they care about. They don't really care how good you are. And you can have all the teaching pedagogy too. Like you can quote all the greats, right? And we rely on Bloom and a lot and Piaget and all those guys. I mean, there were certainly other people doing work. Those guys were, I don't know what the backstory is on how they became so attached to what we do, because there were probably thousands of other scientists doing similar work. It could have been any of them, you know what I mean? But you can be very good at quoting all of that stuff and still be abrasive as hell. So the people skills has been missing from education for a long time. It was really cool to get to Interski last time and see that as the theme. The guest experience is everything. It's like globally, we've come to the realization that you have to be cool first, or at least maybe not first, but concurrently. In order to work with the people in front of you. Yeah. Something we should have known for a long time. It just took us a while. And when I say us, I mean, I guess as a planet, it's taken us a long, and we're still not very good at it. If you turn on the news, we're pretty horrible to each other on a daily basis, but at least.
Oh God. Yeah. There's still a lot of people getting paddled in different ways out there.
Oh my God.
Just not good ways.
It's a mess. So yeah, it's cool to see it surfacing, that the idea that people skills matter.
And then we move into the teaching skills, which is, we have our fundamentals and collaborate on long-term and short-term objectives. Kind of one that's pretty hard to know where you're going to go if you don't set a goal and you don't have a goal for the student. Yeah. They don't have a goal. They don't agree. That collaborate, I think, is pretty important. It's like, yeah, you want to work on that? Nah, we're going to go over here and do this. This is what you need. And that doesn't work too good. Manage information, activities, terrain selection, and pacing. That's a huge one. I think that's the one we'll chat about as we really get into it today. Because, managing information and pacing, it's interesting. The amount of information that can be given and the pacing of standing still forever. We have that a lot when we go to our assessments. And then I know this is yours and it's absolutely mine. I think favorite in the old teach skills is promote play, experimentation, and exploration. Love to do that. I had a great session on Wednesday during Pro Jam that I missed you. We had our Chaos and Company thing planned, and man, I went down a road of old style stem turns, and then we did the modern stem turn. I had Bill Bierman filled in for you, and he did a great job. It was great to have Billy there, but everybody was missing you. We needed you there and keep Billy, because Billy did a great job with us. Yeah. But
next year
it was. Yes. But it was, that is something that I think people struggle with. They're not sure how to play. They're not sure how to experiment. They know the objective, they have their activity. And then, it becomes, how do you explore with that? It's always looking for the right answer sometimes versus looking for just how you can move differently. And I think that's kind of cool. You bring that from a lot of your, even your skateboarding. It's like, how can I know some of the same tricks, you might not do them the same as someone else on your skateboard, but you get the same thing done, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Skateboarding is cool. It's really outcomes based. You either land or you don't, you know what I mean? But skateboarding allows for, and not even allows for, expects individual style. That's built into the culture. So, it doesn't, just look at a trick that a lot of people know, like a kick flip, as long as the board flips over and you land on the wheels, that's essentially the goal. But there are a billion different looks, but it's all good.
Yeah.
It's an outcomes based endeavor.
And you got to have a cool pair of Vans on when you're doing it.
Well, there's no question about that.
And we missed being able to get, I don't know if you got a new pair, but we missed doing that when we went to Big Snow. Usually, that's been like the thing. You go and we help you shop for a new pair of Vans, and you couldn't come.
To get noodle bowl from the Korean restaurant upstairs. Yeah.
So we got to make that happen. And then we move into facilitate the learner's ability to reflect upon experiences and sensations. I think that's a big one in terms of now. I mean, we've always had that in terms of trying to have people understand what they're doing, but I think it's a big part of the learning connection model to have people reflect themselves and for them to verbalize, for them to start to make sure we know they understand the sensations they're having and be able to reflect on their own things so they can replicate it later. I mean, we can tell them, oh, this is what you're supposed to feel, or you should do this, but they need to be able to understand that too.
Yeah. And we've talked about making like the job of the teacher is to become obsolete, but at least with that particular thing you were teaching that day, and that's what the reflection piece works toward. It starts to cement the learning in their brains. Like, we already know the learning. That's why we're the coach. So they can articulate it. They can talk through it. They can ask questions. They can confirm or deny what they think they know at the end of that lesson. Because, I mean, let's face it, like, you can't have this conversation without talking about skill development and Fitz and Posner. And at the end of a lesson, 2-hour lesson, full day lesson, as much as you practice in that amount of time, they're still very much in the cognitive realm of skill acquisition when it comes to that thing. So, by no means have they practiced it to ownership. I mean, I'm sure that can happen, but like, it's probably pretty rare. So that piece at the end, that reflection, is their opportunity to confirm with their coach that they understand so they can go practice, and that's really what makes learning experiential. It's that it's not like, I think sometimes experiential gets thrown around kind of loosely, and I think people sort of confuse either hands-on or authentic situations with experiential, but without that reflection piece, it's not experiential. That's so vital. And it's also sadly, how things go, like especially holiday week, you run out of time, and it's that debrief at the end that suffers, but that's really the important bit. And we've heard, Pete Allison's talked with us about that, and that has to be a piece of it. They have to be involved in the process. And Michael Rogan, who we've talked to real recently, he's multiple times talked about the best thing he can do is get out of the way of the learner. Like, he talks about how we can get in the way of their learning by trying to get in there too much, and that's that balancing act. And it's really neat to hear the high level folks of, Pete Allison and Michael Rogan talk about that. Matt Boyd, I think when he was on with us a couple seasons ago or last season, talked about that too, that, experiential learning has to have that reflection in that piece, as you say. And then we move to adapt to the changing needs of the learner. As their needs learn, their skill development grows, their understanding grows. Sometimes we do things that confuse them. It's like, okay, we've got to address this first, but their needs definitely change as we ski with them. Hopefully ski with them more than once. If people could please invite all their students to come back again, would be great. But, that there. And then, the last one I think is people don't hit it enough, but this one's pretty important. They think of the managing emotional and physical risk. And I think, physical risk is there. We have to focus on what are the challenges we give them. I mean, even on, our magic carpet snow belts, there's a physical risk there of, are they ready for their first turns? Can they ride it? Are they going to be able to stop? Sure. What's the snow like today? But the emotional risk too of understanding, what they're nervous about, or are they afraid just to fail? Are they in a group lesson? And a lot of people don't like to have people see them fail. What age group are we talking about? Certain age groups definitely don't like to see other people, have people watch them, that kind of stuff. Well, there's that. Do you see this at home too? Like, there's this phenomenon you see in the locker room and when we just saw it because we just finished some hiring clinics, and, people who try out for the staff really they don't know what they don't know. Like how could you, so a lot of people come into that training or that early season tryout or however it's structured at your hill, but they come in there pretty confident, and then you've seen it happen, right? There's that moment where they realize like, oh, like there is a whole lot of stuff to know here. You know what I mean? Like that moment where you realize there are people around you who've been doing it for 20 or 30 years and can talk about it and understand it. And and then that's a dangerous moment. That's an important moment for somebody in that situation, I think, because I see a lot of folks hit that moment and then they never then from that point forward get out of that habit of looking externally for learning to happen, and a lot of folks become very passive or docile in their own development. And I got to get the answer from my trainer. I got to get the answer from this examiner. But that's, I mean, you can do it that way, but it's probably a lot more efficient to really embrace it and trial and error and check in with your coach and, be an active participant in the learning. But that's another piece of that emotional risk. You watch people hit that moment, they realize how like there's an actual world here of content and it's global, and it's old. There's a lot to it. And they go, oh my God, like that's an emotional moment I remember that moment.
Yeah. They think when they first come in, I've been skiing for 20 years and I ski pretty good. And then I'm going to teach ski. And then they go through the first training sessions and like, wow, I didn't know there was all this to it. And then, you hear some of them say, I thought I could ski really good. Now I'm kind of questioning, can I ski good? When they start looking at what fundamentals are involved in there and how to do certain things. And we do some activities that may challenge them. They're like, wow, I wondered why I couldn't do that. I just didn't do that before.
I wonder if that's almost a deeper emotional fear than I mean, like people show up for a lesson and maybe they've never skied before, or maybe they ski one day a year or a weekend a year, something like that. They're going to have the normal fears of falling down. Like, do I remember how to get on the chairlift? Like those are all fears for sure. I don't know that they hit you in the soul the way that instructor moment hits you, because you start to question your value. Like, I mean, we've all seen people quit when they fail an exam, right? Like they just, that's it. They're done. That strikes at the core of their belief system about their self. That's a very, very real fear.
Absolutely. Oh. So those are two of our triangles. We got our people skills, our teaching skills. And then we move into the one that I think everyone takes the deep dive, because it's pretty hard. You got to have some content. And Dave Wen talks about it. It's like people get buried in the content sometimes and they never get to the teaching skills, people skills, because they don't have a deep understanding of the technical skills. Mm-hmm. So they're always focused on, what am I going to do next? What do people do moving? How are they moving? What do I work on? So they get wrapped in that and forget the other pieces. But the technical skills are important. How do we, not just the skiing fundamentals, but how do we convey and apply accurate technical information for the sport being taught? How do you convey that? What are the words that you use? When do you use them? How much do you use? As we think of the other things of, pacing information, but, how can we convey the information in a way that works for people? And then also we've got to do what I think is the absolute basis for being a great ski teacher, is you've got to be able to do movement analysis, movement assessment. You've got to be able to observe, evaluate, and prescribe through movement analysis. Without being able to watch how people are moving and then be able to understand how they're moving and understand how you want them to move to be able to reach their goal. All the rest is fluff, which you can have a great time, but are we actually making an effective change in the positive way? And so I really feel that is like the underlying thing that we all need to work on. I continue to work on it. And then it's like, how do I put that into practice?
Well, I think there's a real challenge there these days too. There's a heavy corporate influence in the ski industry right now, which is different from, when I got involved in ski teaching, it was all mom and pops areas. There wasn't this, overarching corporate influence that we have now. And like when I go to those trainings and I sit in on sessions, I really don't hear much about performance change in students. I hear customer service. That's what's being pushed. So for old timers like us who have we care about performance and it's important to us. It's probably why we got involved was really the performance piece. I mean, that's why I got involved. That's not the information new instructors are receiving. They're probably getting it from their trainers, but I don't know that they're getting it from the trainings they're getting from the company. So we have to figure out a way I look at us as protecting that piece of the culture right now. I think in terms of performance, I really feel like these are pretty dark times in the States and as far as ski teaching goes. They're beautiful times for customer service and that sort of thing, but we're losing the tech bit. Yeah. And I think it's our job as people who remember back a couple of decades to really protect that piece. And if new people aren't going to hear that from the trainings they receive at their home resort, then they need to hear it from their trainers, because I'm sure the pendulum will swing at some point. That just seems to be how things work. But right now it's swinging toward making everybody feel happy and welcome, which is great. They should feel happy and welcome, but we also have to make them into good skiers and snowboarders too.
Yeah. And it's, I think sometimes people think when you and I say performance, they think we mean just carving. And I know you don't, because man, we're looking at like, how do they get down the hill? How do they control speed? How do they shape a turn? How do they use the ability, not just to put railroad tracks down, but how do they control speed through turn shape? Mm-hmm. What are they doing to blend the fundamentals that we'll go into now, the 5 fundamentals, to be able to ski differently? How do you ski on a low edge angle? How do you ski on a high edge angle? Right now we've got some wet conditions out there at most of the resorts. Ooh. They're getting a little brown, unfortunately. But, in that wet, heavy snow, you really can't just push the ski sideways. And a lot of our general public struggle with this kind of snow and want to quit because it's heavy, it's wet, it piles up. How do they let the ski move forward through that stuff, but not have to just be slicing? How do they control speed? So it's a variation of that.
It's very important, right? Like you said, to navigate different conditions for sure. But then if you're a one-trick pony or a no-trick pony, some people are no-trick ponies, I guess. How are you going to express yourself on your gear if you don't have access to a full range of skill applications? You know what I mean? Like that's a piece too. Like, and I feel like that's sort of missing. And I'm looking at our posters behind us of Wayne Wong. Wayne exemplified expression. Wayne exemplifies. He still does. He exemplifies expression, and that's why people come out. I mean, I'm assuming that's why I came out. I wanted to be able to navigate terrain and express myself where and how I wanted to. But if all you have is carving, that's pretty unlikely. So to reach autonomy as a skier, self-expression, you have to have a full gamut of skill.
Yeah. And our Alpine fundamentals, we've got 5 of them, and they're not listed in particular order. We'll put that out there because Mr. Shostak wants to make sure everybody knows that everyone likes to put the one at the top. People think because it's the first one listed that it's the most important, but Bob will tell you, and he's got a very good dissertation that is very important. You should listen to it because it is good. I'm just teasing him, but he is 100% right. The first one is control the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the length of the skis. People, we try to look at that. I know I try to look at that and have people focus on, where you're balancing the fore-aft plane. How you balance in that fore-aft plane, how you use the joints in that fore-aft plane does direct pressure along the skis. But it's definitely a lot of folks go, well, that's balance. It's like, well, yes, it is. And as you balance in that plane, you still direct pressure on the ski. Mm-hmm. And then the second one's control pressure from ski to ski and direct pressure towards the outside ski. Super important. You'll hear this. I mean, we hear it a lot from Mr. Lipton. I mean, Eric's like, how do you ski good if you don't direct pressure to the outside ski? And Michael Rogan will come right behind and go, this is a foot-to-foot sport. Mm-hmm. We ski from one. It's still an outside ski dominant sport. sport. And so, yeah, that's definitely one of our fundamentals. Control edge angles through a combination of inclination and angulation. How do we use those during the phases and for different outcomes? Control the ski's rotation with leg rotation separate from the upper body. How do we use the legs to be able to let the skis turn or rotate or pivot? And then the last one's to regulate the magnitude pressure created through ski-snow interaction. How do we regulate that? How do we manage what we're feeling back from the snow? And that, to me, that vertical plane is, when people aren't able to keep their skis on the snow when they want to, or they can take them off the snow when they want to. We know some of our great skiers can bring the skis off the snow for tactical purpose, which is awesome, and use that energy. But how do you manage that? And that, to me, is, I think Terry Barber talked really cool about that, of the touch and feel on snow and being playful with your equipment against the snow. I love how Terry does that when he's skiing, and also how he chats about it. But those are our big five.
Those are the five with slight variations for other disciplines. Yeah, but that's basically it, right?
Yeah. And most that is what we look at when we see good skiing. We look at and we should be able to see those things, whether it's park, pipe, trees, ungroomed, groomed. Those are the things in the Alpine world that we definitely look to in PSA. Just look at the Alpine fundamentals for a minute. Also, just because that's what you brought up, but those you could write those same fundamentals for trail running. It'd be the same. Yep. They're really fundamentals for how bipeds move on that particular gear. I always like bringing it back to that, because it's objective. It's not something that was written willy-nilly. All of those things apply to you when you have your running shoes on and you're taking a run through the woods, or you're walking up or down a spiral staircase. I mean, that it all applies, because it's how we move. Now I agree the statements are bulky, but when you write technical statements, they're pretty often bulky like that, because you're looking for accuracy. So you asked a question earlier about how we convey that stuff, and I think you need to be a good translator. You have to take that language, take those concepts. I don't care if I never hear them articulated again, but I want to hear coaching cues and things to try and feedback based on what they mean, not necessarily what they say. Yes, I'm with you. And then that's where I wanted to move into, because I want people to understand some of our language. Where I started early chatting about, the connection with Penn State, and Pete Allison has really led us in a great way to define, to have things in an order. And people say, well, it's more academic. It's like, well, yeah, because it definitely is more transparent and is able to be understood. And I think, if I paraphrase, when I've had chats with Pete, and we've had him on the podcast, that, you need to know, if you're going to an assessment, you need to know what's expected, and the outcomes need to be defined. The criteria needs to be defined on what you're scored on to be able to achieve those things. And I think that's what he's really helped us do. And the groups that have been involved in this, the task forces, I think, have done a phenomenal job and continue to implement this across the country with all of our trainings this fall. But I think, to help not just those that are going to the assessments, but also the trainers out there that listen to our podcast, I hope they do, to start to understand the language and what it means and how to transfer it. Just because we start getting into it, and Murmur's talked about this, we get into our little acronyms, the LOs and the ACs and the AAs. And I remember at training, and this was some emotional nervousness for me, when this was first being unloaded on us as ed staff a couple of years ago. I heard that a lot of the crew had been in their task forces all summer, and Mr. Erickson and a few others were talking about LOs and AAs and ACs, and I'm sitting there going, did I go through a time warp? I have no idea what they're talking about. I really didn't. And then it was funny, because I joke with Dave Schuling now, and it came up with the UAF, and I'm like, what the hell is that? So it's like UFO, and it's, Unified Assessment Form, which is our scorecard, when we score our assessments, a unified assessment form. So Angelo, I just wanted to, we have, I think, is a real important one, because we started with the fundamentals. I wanted to start there because that's the focus of, that's our learning connection model, and we got the blue ring. we didn't go there, but I mean, in terms of our triangles and understanding the learning connection model, those fundamentals are the basis for our learning connection model. And that's where we should really focus on, like, how are we going to build training? But then as we get into understanding, okay, how do we assess this? What are people going to be assessed on? So they know it goes into, and this is part of training too, the learning outcomes. Like, what is a learning outcome?
Oh, are you asking?
Yeah, of course I'm asking.
Yeah. So if you look at the structure of the entire curriculum, it drills down from the most general to the most specific, right? So fundamentals are very general. National standards are very general. They're broad statements. But when you dig through the performance guides, you very quickly encounter some other language to understand what it means. And I will say, like, I'm looking at my other monitor right here at the Alpine cert standards, and there is a little glossary in here. It's full disclosure, the language of learning outcomes and assessment. It's on page 5. So, like, the stuff is accessible, but it sometimes even reading those descriptions doesn't help. You know what I mean? So, like, so you can drill down through that. A learning outcome is, in my mind, I think of that as that's an observable behavior. Because we're examiners, and look, let's back up for a minute with the language too. I've never seen a document come out that says we're not allowed to use the word examiner. We're not allowed to use the word task anymore. But there is there's some new language because we modeled what we do, our curriculum, after an academic structure. So but like, you can still use those other words. I do. Because we're examiners, we can only score things we see. That's what examine means. You have to look at it and experience it, probably with your eyeballs if you're doing the job we do. And the learning outcomes are those observable behaviors. So, like, a learning outcome for an Alpine fundamental, as an example, is like, can you keep the skis parallel? Like, I can see if the skis deviate from parallel. So that's an observable behavior, right? Assessment activities, aka tasks. That's all things you do. I don't necessarily have a problem with the word drill. I don't have a problem with the word task, and I have been using the word activity. Assessment activity is maybe implies that's an exam situation, but not really either, because I can use an assessment activity in a lesson at the home hill if somebody shows up and I'm trying to diagnose their performance. I might use an assessment activity like a pivot slip or something to see what they do, see how their skis behave when they try that. So even though the word assessment is in it, I don't think it's relegated just to certification exams. It's activities you can use to evaluate somebody's performance while you're making the decision of how to build the lesson out. Assessment criteria is also a term that you'll hear. That's kind of a common sense one. That's the level of skill required, right? Assessment criteria, like how good do you have to be at it? If you're at a level 2 exam or a level 3 exam, those are different standards. That's all that means. And then the very last one that you'll see, if you look in the performance guides and you look at those rubric shaped or those grid shaped, how things are chunked out into those columns and rows, those performance contributors. These are just specific examples of things that would be successful performance or unsuccessful performance. They're not boxes to check, like you have to do each one in your teaching segment in your level 2 exam. These are examples of behaviors that would qualify as successful, contrasted to ones that would be unsuccessful. So the instructor, the examiner, has some very, very specific behaviors to say, oh, well, I do this, so that's successful. Oh, but I also do this. I probably need to change that. And that's how those things are built out. They are very, very thorough.
Yeah. And you had a great suggestion. It was, I think we were chatting on the podcast, or you and I were just talking, and I can't remember which one. It doesn't matter. We're going to say it now. When I look at the performance guides, because I look at them in terms of as a examiner, assessor, and I start to look at them, I'm trying to see the differences because I want to see the progression from level 1 to level 2. So I start to understand the standard in terms of what has to happen at level 2 versus level 1 as they go, from the criteria gets stricter. And higher level. But you had a great suggestion. Like if you're going for a level 1 assessment, that's your goal this year is to go to level 1. Just pull out the level 1 pieces out of the performance guides.
Yeah.
So when you have 3 performance guides, you get your technical piece, whether if you're in Alpine, you have your Alpine, if you're in snowboard, you have your snowboard. But then we all have our teaching and people guys. But you were like, just pull out all the level 1.
Yeah.
If you're going for level 2, just pull out the level 2.
And I think I took that suggestion a step farther to some folks at an event a couple of weeks ago. Is go in and pull all that stuff out, staple them together, keep it in your pocket with your golf pencils, and that's your note sheet. Like, that to me is such an important piece of training and developing. Even if you're not looking at an exam. Having that stuff on quick reference, but then adding your own words to it, your own examples, like, oh, I did this. Oh, I was skiing with Dave. He said this. I like that. Be very active in how you go about it. But if like for me to sit back and memorize all that stuff without modifying it or manipulating it somehow, I couldn't do that. I don't even want to do that. But like if I'm training for a specific level of cert, print that stuff out, keep it with you, write on it, have other people write on it. That's a living document. And I think all said and done, if you were to take out, like you said, level 1, if you were to take out the people teaching and tech stuff for level 1, you'd have, even if you only did it front sided, you'd probably have 8 pieces of paper stapled together. And you'd have the whole back to take notes on. Like, that's a beautiful little workbook that you can make for yourself. I think that's really a great thing to do.
Yeah. And I hope trainers right now just listen to that. And I hope trainers across the East, across the country will take note of that and have guide their staff to do that. Get the training leaders, get your trainers to help your staff do that, to help their training, break it down to what they're looking at. So it isn't, because as you look through the whole thing, it's a lot of, and why look at level 2 and 3 if you're looking at level 1? If you're looking at level 3, look at level 3. If that's where you're going. And it's kind of neat. I think people get confused too, like, because we have our standards, and there's the standards document. We have our Alpine, we have our snowboard, we have our tele and all our disciplines, cross country, adaptive. Did I miss one? Probably, and then I'll get yelled at, but I didn't mean to miss one. If I did, I'm sorry.
Snow bike. We haven't the snow bike yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, right.
It's not. But it's not coming. It's not coming. I
don't know.
Riding snow bike fundamentals.
Lipton might push for it, man. They're loving it at Big Snow, and people love getting on them, man. So it's it could come. It could come. I bet you Kevin Jordan will be all over it. So, but people get when I look at because I go from the standards and people start looking at the assessment forms, the scorecards, the unified assessment forms for on hill. And so just for an example, like you take the skiing, if I go to the standards and I look at the assessment criteria for a level 2, if I look at that assessment criteria, when I go to the unified assessment form, the scorecard that people can look at, they can download, they can see that PDF right from the national website. When they look at that, it's the same wording. I think sometimes they think they're different. Like you will see in the national standards, I'll read it right now. Integrate 2 or more of the technical. That's level 1 I'm on. Okay. Dave's not on the right page. Isn't that typical? But I go to the level 2 and it's integrate 3 or more technical fundamentals through all turn phases to achieve prescribed ski performance. That'll be like the exact wording on that score on the assessment form. And then we've got a second score that's manage each of the technical fundamentals as prescribed, which I think now that listed as individual on the Alpine one, it listed individual, how the individual fundamentals are used. But manage each of the technical fundamentals. But I think it uses the word now individual on our scorecard, but same thing. Manage turn shape, turn size, and line as needed in beginner through easiest advanced and through the easiest advanced zones. That is those three things. Those just transfer to the ski park because this is right out of the standards for level 2, the assessment criteria for level 2 skiing. And then it's kind of cool. You talked about the learning outcome. The learning outcome in the standards adapts the technical fundamentals to demonstrate specific outcomes in beginner, intermediate, and some advanced terrain. And then it seems like people because I was too, going back and forth when all this first came out and going, where is this? When I go to the ski performance for a level 2 and I read integrate fundamentals, integrate 3 or more technical fundamentals through all turn phases, achieves prescribed ski performance. The individual fundamentals, manage each of the technical fundamentals as is prescribed. Versatility, manage turn shape, turn size, and line as needed in beginner through easiest advanced zones. It's just transcribed over. And
that's what we score, right? So
yes,
that stuff is scoreable. Whereas in the past, not even the too distant past, a few years ago, we were actually scoring tasks.
Correct.
So we're not, the important bit I think to understand there is where it says as prescribed, because we can modify these tasks or assessment activities on the hill in the exam to see the level of skill acquisition, so just a simple example. If I assign the group or we as a couple examiners assign the group medium radius turns with speed control, that would be a run. And we could look at that, see if the fundamentals were blended at the level, the level required, right? But then you can throw a little bit of a monkey wrench in there to see if that level of skill acquisition holds up. So we could say, okay, we're going to do medium radius turns again, but we're going to change one thing. Let's lower the edge angle and make these more skiddy than the last run. And then see if the fundamental blend is still as efficient as it was the first run. And if it is, you've confirmed that level of skill that level of skill has been acquired. And if things fall apart, then you have to do some more digging, but that's all that means. When it says as prescribed, it means we're going to throw some activities at the group to do, and we're going to change them up. And do you have the skill level, the versatility? Have you practiced enough to be able to do them these couple of ways we throw at you? And if the answer is yes, it's a good day.
Yeah. And it's cool because for me, I love that we've gone this route. We away from scoring tasks of this is the task, and we were so rigid because people want to know exactly what they had to do. We pretty much did it almost at a certain speed with a certain edge angle with certain radius, and we still have those defined. Those are our starting points, which are awesome to have those starting points the way Mr. Erickson has written those in our assessment guide here in the East. And there's cool stuff on the application of the fundamentals, that those are the things we look at that relate specifically to how the fundamentals are applied for that task. And that's really the only things I score in terms of in my head, okay, how did they do this? But I don't score it on that one task. I'm looking how did they apply these fundamentals in this? And it's exactly like you said, all right, they've got different students. Some students might be at that edge. Let's see if they can do it skiddier for some students that are in kind of a lower range, and need more of a flatter ski in that zone of skiing. Or maybe it's just a super, super firm day, and going on a super high edge angle might go a little too fast. So it really shows the range of how you can teach the different students. But it's not one task. I need to look at a range. I need to look at that. I need to look at also maybe short turns. I need to look at how you apply that then in the bumps, maybe how you apply it on green terrain and how you apply it on blue terrain. Are those similar in your fundamental application?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the tasks they're just lenses for us to look through, and when I say us, I mean all 33,000 members. These are not things that only are used in exams by examiners. You can use these activities to practice yourself, how easy is it to get in your habits and do the same thing all the time? But, as an athlete, as a skier or a snowboarder, are you challenging yourself to try different things? Are you riding the same chair with the same people and you ski the same line and the same medium radius turns all day long? That's very easy to fall into that habit. But Are you using these assessment activities to challenge yourself to practice? Oh, I haven't done short turns for a while. I'm gonna do those today. Today is short turn day, or a lot of folks have probably never done an actual giant slalom turn. Like, I'm going to practice those this weekend because I saw them in these guides. But as the other piece of our job as instructors is to work with students, you use those activities either descriptively or prescriptively. And a descriptive use is if you come and you buy a private lesson and I'm assigned to your lesson. What do you want to work on, Dave? You're like, oh, whatever. I want to get better at edging. I'm like, well, try this and let me see what happens. So I might throw a railroad track at you or something like that and see how you manage the edging during that activity. And I see some glitches. I've just used railroad tracks descriptively. I've asked you to do them. I describe what I see and I plan the lesson. That's like a front-loaded way to use railroad tracks versus we go through the lesson and I'm like, oh, I think railroad tracks might benefit Dave. So I teach you that thing, how to do them. You practice them and then apply that new skill to your mountain skiing. Now I've just used the same activity prescriptively.
Yep.
And we all use them that way. That's what they are. These are our, if folks who take martial arts know kata. You practice your kata, your forms, so you have the movements on lock when you need them when you fight. Like, that's why you do katas, is to own these movements and understand how they apply in a controlled environment, so that if a couple of street toughs get in your face when you're out, taking your significant other to dinner, and you protect yourself. Like, there's practice and there's application. That's the same thing with these activities in skiing. We have all these billions of different little activities and variations that we can play with. But really, the point of them is so when you're in a situation on the mountain, can you get down there safely? Can you get down there the way you want? So they almost have that. They're like doing a kata. Go out and practice specific moves and drills and wire in the movements. I read Michaela one time said, I think she said it, who knows, but like, she practices until she can't possibly do it wrong.
Yep.
Like, we can do that too.
Yeah, well, we got to get Ron Kipp on here to chat about this, because Ron made a statement. I was working with him when the Skills Quest was just coming out, and he was coming around the country and working with a lot of us on implementing the Skills Quest and working those drills. And it was, somebody had said something, and he told a little story about, an athlete that couldn't do a task. And it was super frustrating. He's like, he educated that athlete on, you've just found gold. If you find an activity, you find some drill that you can't do, you found gold. That's the one to work on. That's what's missing. Yeah. And I'd love that. We got to have Ron come on. We got to try to contact him and have him come on the podcast just to talk about that in motor learning. Because there's nobody better than him in that, and in figuring out, and explaining how in motor learning, when you find stuff you can't do, those are the things you should practice. It's like, because that's how you build your base, your versatility, your ability to move the body in different ways. And I know it'd be fun to listen to him chat about that, because I thought it was so cool. I've never forgotten that. They're like, find something you can't do, you found gold. And that's what you need to work on.
And I love that, how much you're using the word practice. Like, you have to practice, if you want to get better. Sometimes we might assume people want to invest into developing their skills. Like, that's probably not true of all instructors. Of people who are very happy with their skill level and they just like to teach and they want to do that. So it's not suggesting everybody needs to go out and do that. But if somebody does have ambition of getting better and leveling up or winning club races or whatever, you have to practice to get better. It's just the way it works.
Yeah. And I love it. I get to practice every day I get on the hill, man. Every day I'm working with a group, I get to practice. And that's the part I really want, and you and I've talked, and we really want to try to help. We want to make some influence in helping people be more successful at our assessments. There's not an ed staff member in the country that doesn't want that. I mean, we all do. I mean, people, I think, sometimes get this, we get this bad rap that we're so hard and, we don't care if people fail and we try to fail people. It's like, man, we try to do everything we can to help them. It's a great day when many, many people I've had a couple exams in the past that I've had 8 out of 8 in the skiing assessment, then being called an exam pass. It was so cool because it's a standard. We talked about this the other day when we were chatting with Michael Rogan. You talked about Angelo. It's a standard. Nobody's competing against each other when we're in that level 1, level 2, level 3 assessments. Right. They're working to show they meet the standard, and are be able to display the behaviors and our learning connection model to have good skiing, good teaching, and good people skills and good skiing.
I don't know anybody who wants to deliver bad news. Nobody wants to do that,
No.
And not everybody's going to be successful, but back to the people skills, like that's an opportunity because we've all seen this too, where people aren't successful, but they understand why. Yeah. They probably feel bad, but they're not discouraged enough that they're not going to come back and try it again. And I mean, if you can't pass that day, that's the next best option is to understand and go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I wasn't prepared, but I can get there and I'll be back like that. You have to be pretty good at people skills to pull that off. But that, to your point, that's what we all want for sure. Like, I don't feel like I'm here to protect skiing. Like I'm not trying to defend it so other people can't get good at it like that. But just be great if everybody got good at it.
Oh, my frustration comes from, I want to see more people pass. I want them to achieve it. And in the level 1 and level 2 zone, our level 1 certification of level 2, that's what we're doing every day. When you're coaching, when you're teaching, when you're on the hill, you're working with folks in those zones. Yep. Now at level 3, absolutely, here in the East especially, and I say that just from my experience, and most of us do say it, we don't have an incredible amount of upper lessons at every single resort. Mm-hmm. Even my home resort, there's not a lot of bump lessons. There's not a lot of upper level stuff. There's some. So the ability to be doing that all day long to teach in that zone is definitely limited. But level 1 and level 2, we teach in the beginner and intermediate zone all the time. I go to the home hill and where am I? I'm over in the learning center area. I'm on that intermediate beginner type terrain working with folks. And that's where my whole staff is. And you can work on all your stuff then. But it's digging in, like you say, think about a side slip. Think about that J turn where you're just on the snow belt magic carpet and you're making the steps around that first turn. How are you making those steps? Mm-hmm. When you take it into a turn, you do a fan progression and you start doing almost 1,000 steps all the way around, even if you're on the magic carpet. Mm-hmm. Are you stepping in the direction you want to? Are you using good fundamentals? How should that activity be used? And you gave them a great answer that look at our assessment guide. They're not just assessment tools. They're, as Bob Shostak called them way in the past, when we still called them tasks. They were educational tasks, he used to call them. They're not just exam tasks. They are the activities we use to help us know if we're moving the right way in terms of when you can get people to step a certain way. You can get people to side slip and use the lower parts of the legs. They don't have to just tip from throwing their body across. How do they get the ski actually to slip? I mean, it's hard for people when you get new people on snow and they start to get into that, start to move on the learning center and starting to go to hopefully some easy blue terrain. They need the ski to slip a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, teaching them to do that stuff. And are you practicing that with good fundamentals? Mm-hmm. We've got great videos. My God, if you're working on a hockey stop, just watch the new Nordica video with Troy Walsh and Michael Rogan and Megan Jones. And there's stuff on the Matrix. And I know that's being evolved. We've talked about already, but I just hope people realize that they can use their teaching time. Yeah. That is all training for them. Mm-hmm. All training.
Yeah, no, I fully agree about that. And I fully agree about the videos. I love that they've videoed that at the ideal level, because it's ripping. Like even the level 1 activities are ripping. I remember on the group text when we found out the level 1 video was available, I watched the straight run, and I texted the group. I said, we don't have that much pitch or vertical at my mountain.
Yeah.
Like, that is a hell of a straight run, but why not show it at that level? It's great to show it at that level because we see it on flat all the time, you know? I think videos are great. And I also think there's no substitute for really studying and like active studying, reading a book with a pencil in your hand and writing in the margins and writing down questions and asking questions. Right. You're holding up Ellen's book, Skiing and the Art of Carving. And this is what I'm reading now, Technical Skills for Alpine Skiing by Ellen Post Foster. Like, my pencil's in it right there. That's the page I'm on this time around. My writing's all through it. And this is it, man. Like, this is gold. And anybody who doesn't know this book or know who Ellen Post Foster is, do some research and figure it out, because like I read this book when I'm having my morning coffee and I'm flipping through pages and I'm like, oh, you know what? That's the task I'm going to do today. That's what I'm going to practice. There are too many tasks in this book to practice in one season. This is an absolute masterpiece of what we do. And it's published in 1995. It's so relevant, it could have been published yesterday. And it's a gem of a book. And I think people should go buy it.
Yeah. And I was reading yesterday, and I literally we're not joking. I was reading the step turn section and looking at step turns, converging, diverging, and also skating in there. She's got all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's just awesome stuff in addition to all of our manuals. And like you said, this one I think she put out in 1998. Yeah. And
she's written some of the most important books in what we do. And I don't see them in the locker room. I used to back in the day. I don't hear people talk about them. They really need to be resurrected by everybody who cares about, performance and alpine skiing. And if you ski with her, she does them all better than you do anyway, so she can coach you through them too. So
that's right.
Just take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, I know we're trying to stress it a lot, and people are like, what do they push? We're pushing for. I want people to take some initiative. My wife's like, at some point, people need to take responsibility for themselves. And yes, there is so many resources out there, but you have to take the time. And it is time. It's time to sit down and shut off the phone and shut off the TV and look at some of the material. Read some stuff on skiing. There's great stuff out there. Our manuals are great now. Also, like we said, the Ellen Post Foster stuff. We were reading it yesterday, both of us. But you need to dig in a little bit. You need to take the time, but you got so much time you're teaching on the hill that you can practice that stuff, use that stuff, and then go talk to your trainers and that. And I hope that the trainers out there listening are encouraging their folks to do that. We want everyone to start digging in deeper into understanding activities and how you use them to get people to ski and work, and then how to coach them.
And it's not intended to come across as blaming or accusatory.
No.
I just think some of these pieces of how we developed have been lost as the internet has just become ubiquitous on the planet. We go to YouTube, we watch videos, and that's fine, but it's not complete, No. So there's a whole realm of materials available to folks in these books. And like, I think anybody who's serious about getting good at what we do needs to be an active user of those books. And that, like I said, like, active means, first of all, owning them, opening them up, purposefully picking things to practice. Purposeful practice is huge. And then mine's got writing all through it. It's dog-eared and beat up, and that's how I developed. And I think it works, or I wouldn't encourage people to do it. But man, go on the internet and type in Ellen Post Foster and books and buy every one of them that you can. Because why wouldn't you? Donate them to your ski school.
Yeah. And I hope people listen, because it's not that we're badgering. I'm trying to promote. I want people to start getting some study groups together. There's some cool ones across the country. I know some of the Western gang has, I think Aspen has one, and a couple other places they have their study groups going on that they get on. It's either once a week or twice a week, and they do some MA stuff or talk about a topic. Start doing that. Get 4 or 5 of you. Man, Zoom is easy. get a group on Zoom, start chatting about some stuff. We do it with Ed staff. We have Ed staff calls. I know Sue Kramer's is working on ones to try to get us on with the whole Ed staff soon. I do stuff with my development team. Just chat. I mean, we do it at breakfast. I mean, how many times do we go to breakfast and lunch? And what are we talking about, Angelo? We're on the road and we're having breakfast, right?
Let's talk about skiing,
Yeah. And I think that, I hope people, dive into a book. Don't just think about what comes out of your head. Dive in and chat about something in Ellen's book, Chris Fellows' books.
Throw the challenge out there too. I'm sorry. We'll come back and talk about Chris's book because I really like it too. But
yeah,
I would challenge the Zoomers among us, and we're all Zoomers now like that. It took the world by storm, but maybe we should impose a soft rule that for every Zoom meeting you participate in, you have to cash it in with 3 actual on-hill sessions to practice the stuff you talked about on the Zoom call. Like we can't shift to Zoom.
No,
entire. You can over Zoom. We're over Zooming. You have to move the body and practice the things and look at the stuff real time. Like I agree, Zoom is terrific, but when you can do slow-mo on a video and play it over and over and over again, like there's a value to that for sure, but that's not what's going to happen in your lessons you're teaching. And that's not what's going to happen in your, in your assessment, at least not in the East. Like we don't do the video MA in the Eastern US. So it's going to be real time. You're going to watch skiers and riders coming at you or beside wherever your vantage point is, but you have to be able to do it for real too. So I love the Zoom cohort opportunities. I think they should be on-hill cohorts with a Zoom component rather than the other way around.
Yeah, it's got to be combined. You can't do just one, you got to have it as a good mixture. And like you said, you don't need to do 8 hours of Zoom. Do a half hour, 45 minutes, hour at tops with the crew, and then boom, you should be on hill for a few hours. You're on hill teaching, and then, get out there on hill for the weekend.
Turn it into a book club. Like do your Zoom as a book club. Everybody has the same passage to read from Ellen's book, or you mentioned Chris Fellows, the Tactics for All Mountain Skiing. Yeah. I think that's such an important book because we're such a body centric group of folks. We don't talk about tactics as much as we could. That's a terrific book to have.
I think that your book club idea is awesome, man. Just get a book, read a section of it, talk about it, and then go out and practice it on hill. Yeah. And then talk about what you did on hill versus another chapter, reflect. Mm-hmm. We got to go back to our fundamentals. But I'm hoping this today, Angelo, which, we're going to keep trying. And I know we'll do some things where we'll get more in-depth specific to like some activities, some things on hill. And, definitely some things I wanted to leave people with. And I know you have a couple comments before we finish is that, some big things to think about as they prepare to just be good teachers. You need to move. Like you said, like you can't just Zoom. Like we can't do a Zoom meeting with our beginner students and then expect them then to go out on their own and be able to ski. Mm-hmm. So when we're out on the hill, you can't stand there and just talk to them all day. And then all of a sudden, 10 minutes at the end of the lesson, expect them to be able to do it. They've got to move and experience skiing. Yeah. So you have to have movement as a big part of it and how you pace the lesson to move. And I say that because one of the issues at our assessments that we see is that people don't move. They'll have a whole run in 30 minutes to ski that trail from top to bottom, and they will use maybe a couple 100 feet of a half-mile trail. Mm-hmm. I mean, and so use the terrain. You have warm-up runs. There's definitely usually a warm-up run. And even if you're in the teaching one, especially there's circle ski, then you're going to be circle skiing or doing some kind of MA activity to get the group going, to know what terrain you have available in the distance, the pitches, how it undulates. Pay attention to that as you're doing your MA and use the whole terrain. You got 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. If I had a lesson and I only moved 200 feet and then the instructor finished the lesson there and skied off because they had to go to the next lineup and I still had 3/4 of the trail to ski, I might not be happy. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's use that terrain and pace your information. Mm-hmm. Another one I have is that I hear a lot from the staff and I see it when I'm doing assessments is that they give us so much. And it was kind of cool talking to Michael Rogan when we were talking to him about, he's like, it's not about the amount of information. It's that it's, people can't remember an entire book. You have to give them little snippets they're going to remember, because they can't know all the parts and pieces going down East Fall. Give them a cue, give them an understanding what they got to do, and let them go.
Yeah. Well, Michael's an absolute wizard when it comes to minimalism and coaching.
Yeah.
Like I've told this story on a couple different podcasts and whatnot, but I skied with him last year at Academy, and he figured me out in the first 30 minutes, and he'd just come up beside you and say, hey, I saw this, or hey, try this. I'll let you chew on it for a minute. Do you understand? Yeah, I do. And he'll just ski away. Like he lays a foundation with the group for what the overarching need is. You have to kickstart the lesson, the coaching somehow. And I remember last year at Big Sky on Monday morning, we were just skiing outside ski, not laid out like a specific exam task. He said at some point during the turn, lift the inside ski up. And he took that, he took that and turned it into using the length of the ski for the whole group. But we all had individual quirks, but all those quirks changed the pivot point. So we're putting the pivot point, up closer to the tip, and he recognized that. So let's hit this baseline activity of outside ski, which got everybody centered. And then whatever the next thing to fall apart was for each of us, that's where he gave us our individual coaching. But it was so minimalistic. He doesn't talk a lot, because you don't need, he talks a lot, don't get me wrong, on the chair, and it's hilarious and it's nonstop and it's Rogan. But when it comes to the coaching, he's like a surgeon. Just boom, here it is. You get it, try it. And then I'll check in with you in an hour, because he also understands you have to have practice time. Yeah. It's awesome. Not a lot of talking.
He's worked very hard and is very good at the craft. And so to be good at the craft here, I'm thinking of it as like writing, because, I'm thinking of Mark Aiken and Katie Britton, and they're like, you got a point to give, talk about your points, then go into them, and then make sure they know the points again. So, this podcast, definitely you and I wanted to do this, and you can add it in here too, I wanted the trainers also, not just people that are training for the test, but I wanted them to have a better understanding of, focus on the fundamentals, really start there. Think about the fundamentals and the 3 triangles and what they are, and how you start to think about how you apply them, where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are, and build the training around it. The trainer should build the training around it. And then, as we dig into that, use your teaching time, understand what you're doing out on the hill, especially for our level 1, level 2 candidates. You've got tons of time, man. Every time you're teaching, you can be working on stuff, and then you can go talk to your trainers afterwards about things you had trouble with, things you thought went well. And then and I love where you add in, like you said earlier, like write stuff down, and you showed your book and you've got stuff written in there. People need to still do the write down stuff. Even if they type in a computer, they need to write, they need to read, they need to talk about it. We need to be in all modes of learning. And I hope the training programs and the trainers and the lead trainers start getting that to happen more. And let's use Zoom, but like you said, let's not use it for 8 hours of Zoom a week and 1 hour on snow. Let's be smart about because like you said, when you're on hill, the MA part, you're going to do it live. Video is awesome. I use it all the time. I don't think there's probably anybody in the East that uses video for MA more than I do. But then you got to let the thing play too, man. It's going to be in real time. But for me, those are some big things I hope people get out of the podcast today. And hopefully some trainers, the trainees, everyone has some fun and understands this is us trying to help and trying to guide a little bit. And we want to be part of the solution.
Right. And I love all that. You do use a lot of video MA, but you can also back it up on the hill. That comes from practice and experience. So, I want to emphasize the point. Like sometimes I feel like some people in our group and our organization sort of impose a performance increase on people who that may not necessarily be what they're here for. That probably is a pretty big turnoff. So I would say, to trainers, figure out, first of all, what people's goals are, like what motivates them. Like I said, there is absolutely nothing wrong. It not only is there nothing wrong with it, it's a beautiful thing to show up at the resort every weekend and your whole motivation is to like just ski with beginners and turn them on to, like, if that's what your gig is, I love that, because that's what makes our business run. You know what I mean? But for folks who do intend to get better at performance and have goals of certification and maybe even beyond, getting involved with the education staff, something like that, you have to go about it very proactively. There's just no doubt. And so what I would encourage people to do, and in addition to everything you just said, is know what you're selling. Know what good skiing looks like. And I think that is a shortcoming a lot of times. Like, and this is probably a pretty good use of video. Find 4, I'm just going to say skiing, but same with snowboarding. Find 4 skiers you like, and maybe in different disciplines and different genders. You know, for example, find a racer you really like to watch ski. You know, find a male and find a female racer you really like to watch ski, and find some clips of them on YouTube and save them and make those something you watch regularly. And then find some free skiers or all mountain skiers. Like, I love to watch Marcus Gaston ski. And anybody on YouTube or on Instagram who doesn't follow Madison Rose I think she's out of Jackson Hole, young redheaded girl, former racer, all mountain skier. I love watching that girl ski. So have some variety in gender and you know, within your sport, some disciplines, all mountain racing, terrain part, whatever it is, and have some great skiing, like that you can roll your mental tape, so that when you are watching, when you are watching people in your lessons and you're doing MA on them, you can compare them to those images, you know. And it doesn't matter if they don't want to be racers or big mountain skiers. You're certainly not going to make them worse by getting them to ski more like those folks. You know what I mean? But if you don't, and that happened when I taught public school. It took me a few years to understand the scope of my content area. You know, you don't show up as a brand new or at least I didn't. Maybe I'm not that astute, but I didn't show up on day one as a biology teacher and understand the depth and the breadth of the content that I was teaching in that setting, in that building. It takes a while to understand where your one class fits into these other classes and all that stuff. And the same thing holds true with skiing. You know, you have to understand the scope of what you're selling. So if you're very familiar with beginners and how they move, most of us, you also have to understand the other end of that and have some really, really ideal images to shoot for. The Nordica videos are great. Go out, you know, Return of the Turn, whatever. Just go watch great skiing for that purpose, to have a reel to roll in your head when you're watching actual performance real time. Well, that doesn't look much like Marcus Caston, but if we make this change today, it'll get that image closer to that. That doesn't look much like Madison Rose, but if I can make this change today, it'll get them closer to that. And then you have something to shoot for. But we're pretty good at shooting arrows. Sometimes we just don't shoot them at a target.
Yep. Well, I think that's a good spot to leave today's podcast, and hope everybody enjoyed it. And we want to thank our friends out there, the podcast. I want to thank Blizzard Technica for continuing to support us. And it's been great, that relationship. We also want to thank Nick's Boot Fitting. Nick does a great job over there. And you need some boots, or you need some work done, or just need some new footbeds, man, that is the place to go over by Mount Snow. And then also Rollerblade, because that is your summertime fix. If we're not on the bikes, you got to be on the rollerblades. So thanks everybody for listening. And it's great that we have at least 5 listeners now, Angelo.
Oh,
but please, if you're liking
numbers.
Yeah. So, but if you, it really helps if you can like or subscribe to the Spotify or to YouTube, wherever you watch and listen to us. But it really helps us with the channels on each platform and helps to keep these things going. So, hope to see a bunch of you out there in the hill and in some events and some good skiing. Please, everybody, start doing the snow dances. We need some cold. We need some snow. We need it all across the East Coast. And from talking with Michael Rogan, they need it even out west in California. It was 50 degrees when we were talking to him. So, we need some cold weather and snow, and we need it to start the new year. So,
All right.
see you all out there.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.